When we think about suicide, our first instinct is to zoom in on the individual. We think about their personal battles, their inner demons, their private pain. And of course, it is an incredibly personal tragedy. But what if that's not the whole picture? What if the real cause isn't just an isolated loose brick or a person lost on an aimless drive? Today, we're going to dig into a theory that turns this whole idea on its head, suggesting the roots of this pain might actually be found in the society around us. So let's ask that question directly. Is suicide only a personal tragedy? Is it purely a matter of individual psychology, something that happens inside one person's head? Or could we be missing something much, much bigger?
For most of human history, the answer to that was a resounding yes. It was always seen as a deeply personal act, a problem of the mind, or maybe the soul. But then, in the late 19th century, a thinker came along, looked at all the numbers, and had a thought so radical it basically changed the conversation forever.
And that thinker was the French sociologist Émile Durkheim. His argument was, honestly, a game changer. He said, hey, everyone, to really get a handle on this, we need to stop putting the individual under a microscope. We need to grab a telescope and look at the whole society they're living in. So here's the core of his idea, in a nutshell. He basically said that our risk of suicide is tied directly to how strong or, how weak our connections are to the world, to our family, our community, our shared values. When those social bonds start to fray, we become a lot more vulnerable.
And this part is absolutely crucial. Durkheim wasn't trying to explain why one specific person, say John Doe, ended his life. He was asking why some groups, some entire societies, had way higher or lower rates than others, year after year. For him, that rate wasn't just a bunch of sad stories. It was a social fact. It was a measurable feature of the society itself. And he believed two major social dangers were driving those numbers.
All right, let's talk about the first big danger. He called it egoistic suicide. And probably the easiest way to wrap your head around this is to picture yourself as a single brick in a giant wall. So what is egoistic suicide? Well, it's that profound feeling of isolation you get when you're just not connected enough to your community. It's when you feel like your life doesn't really have a bigger purpose, like there's just not enough social glue holding you in place. You're on your own. And he didn't just make this up. He found some really fascinating evidence in the data from his era. For example, he noticed that Protestants, who tended to have a more individual relationship with their faith, had higher suicide rates than Catholics, who were part of a really strong communal church structure. He saw the exact same pattern with unmarried people versus married people. In both cases, it seemed like these powerful social bonds, the church, the family, were acting as a kind of protective shield. And this brings us right back to that loose brick idea. See, a brick that's firmly set in a wall, held tight by the mortar of community and shared purpose, is incredibly strong. But a single loose brick, well, it's fragile, it's easy to knock over. For Durkheim, egoistic suicide is what can happen when a person becomes that loose brick. But a lack of connection, that's only half the puzzle. There's a whole other danger. The second danger he identified is something he called anomic suicide. Now, if the first problem was about not being connected enough, this one's totally different. This is about not having enough rules or guidance. The best way to think about it, imagine you're driving a car with no speed limit, no road signs, and no destination. So this word, anomy, it basically means a state of normlessness. It's what happens when the social rules that tell us what's important, what to aim for, how to act, when all those rules suddenly just fall apart. Without that structure, we're just left floating. We have all these infinite desires, but no real map for how to get anywhere meaningful. And here's the really wild part. Anomie isn't just about bad stuff happening. I mean, sure, a huge economic depression can trigger it because it just shatters everyone's goals. But so can sudden wealth. Think about it. If you win the lottery tomorrow, all your old rules and ambitions go out the window. That can be just as confusing and scary. In fact, Durkheim argued that modern life itself, with its nonstop rapid-fire change, kind of keeps us in a constant, low-grade state of anomie. And that aimless drive analogy just captures it perfectly. At first, having no rules sounds great. It feels like freedom. You can put the pedal to the metal. But pretty soon, with no lane markings or road signs, things get confusing. Then they get chaotic. And finally, with no destination in sight, it just becomes terrifyingly meaningless. That feeling of despair, that's the core of anomic suicide. So let's put these two dangers together, the loose brick and the aimless drive. What do you get? Well, you get a pretty sharp picture of our modern individualistic world. And the crazy thing is, Durkheim saw all of this coming more than 100 years ago.
The way our modern world is built, it kind of pushes us towards individualism. That weakens the social mortar, making us vulnerable to becoming those loose bricks. But at the very same time, our world is all about constant, dizzying change, which erodes the rules of the road, making us vulnerable to that aimless drive. We're getting hit from both sides. So let's just boil it down to its simplest form. Egoistic suicide, that comes from too little connection. It's the feeling of, I am alone. Anomic suicide, that comes from too little guidance. It's the feeling of, I am lost. And crucially, Durkheim argued both of these come not from a broken mind, but from a broken social environment. So what's the takeaway? Well, Durkheim's work basically hands society a massive responsibility. He's saying that for people to thrive, society has to provide two essential things. First, those deep, meaningful connections that build a strong wall against loneliness. And second, a clear, stable set of values, a roadmap, to guide us on our journey. And that really leaves us with a pretty heavy question for right now for our world. In this age of endless choice, social media, and constant change, are we actually building strong walls together? Or are we all just collecting loose bricks?